Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Poetry. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Emily Dickinson's poem, I Started Early, Took My Dog. This video is going to take you through 5 key quotes of the poem and help you analyse language, structure and form. So get your flashcards ready and let's get revising. Okay, so starting with the opening stanza. I'm not actually going to talk to you that much about the first 2 lines because they're fairly straightforward, but I just wanted to pop them in. What I really want to talk to you about is the metaphors in the last 2 lines of the stanza. The mermaids in the basement came out to look at me. So we've got 2 metaphors here because obviously there aren't mermaids. She's imagining the mermaids. And the basement is the word that she's using to describe the bottom of the sea. So she's imagining mermaids at the very, very bottom of the sea coming out. So what we've got is this idea of mystery versus familiarity. Basement is obviously describing the bottom part of a house. And as we know, Emily Dickinson was a recluse. So it makes sense that she would use these kind of grounding images of familiarity. But we're immediately being told that there is something sort of special awaiting us here, the very fact that mermaids are involved. And there's a sort of suggestion of intention here that the mermaids came out to look at her, to assess her, but she doesn't seem, the narrator, bothered about that. She seems, and although I've not put this in the PowerPoint, in the second stanza to be very kind of willing in that moment, almost quite proud. Moving down to the third stanza of the poem, I have put the whole one in because for the terms you need to see the way that this stanza develops. So she's just talked about, the narrator has just described the boats in the water, sort of extending out their ropes, almost like calling to her. And then this comes in, but no man moved me till the tide went past my simple shoe and past my apron and my belt and past my bodice too. So here we are looking at metaphor. And euphemism. I probably should have popped euphemism there. When it talks about no man having moved her, yes, you can read that as no man has affected me yet, but really it's a metaphor for virginity. She's saying I've not been moved, I've not been impacted upon in that way. And then we get this extraordinary personification of the sea and the movement of the sea, the deliberate movement of the sea. So the tide becomes a man. So she's saying, I haven't been yet moved, but then the tide is acting as a male lover. And the tide went past my simple shoe and past my apron, my belt, my bodice too. So we've got a sort of semantic field of clothing here, but that actually represents the body. And you'll notice it goes shoe, apron, belt, bodice. So it's going up her body. And that's emphasized as well by the anaphora and past my and past my. So it's this kind of growing, building movement. So that in itself has very, very kind of sexual connotations because it is to do with the sort of physicality of her body. It's sort of taking her over. So the quote I've popped in is, and then I started to, and he followed close behind, but I wanted you just to look at it in conjunction with an earlier line, which was, and made as he would eat me up. So that's the first line of the 4th stanza. So just straight after this semantic field. Now, obviously, this is metaphorical. But again, the notion of consumption, consuming, is very, very sexual. So she's basically saying that it is as if he is going to fully consume me. Okay, now this is where interpretations of the poem differ, but I've got mine and I feel quite strongly about it, and I'll explain why. Some people wonder if this is about fear, and if this imagined sexual act, because it is imagined, yeah, all metaphor, is in some way non-consensual. And the way that that is read is because eat me up has a sort of villainous kind of tone, you know, like she's not a part of it. And some people read this line of her starting and him following as her trying to run away, trying to move away, or being frightened. So some people read this as quite threatening, and that it's therefore exploring the notion of sexual fear, imagining the poet creating a narrator that is frightened of sex in order to explore perhaps some issues that she has herself. However, I don't think this is the case, because then I started to, so this is the last line of the 4th stanza. And then he followed close behind. I think the starting is about participating. I don't think it started shock. I think it's about participation. I think actually started could be here a metaphor for orgasm, for female orgasm. And if that's the case, so it could be female orgasm, or it could just be enjoyment. It's a movement, it's a feeling. So it could be enjoyment. And then what we've got is this anaphora and enjambment. So the enjambment carries over onto the next line of the stanza, sorry, I should say. And we've got here this repetition, and he followed. So that, in my interpretation, means he too is enjoying the sex. It is enjoyable, consensual, and he's following close behind. And if we think that this is a metaphor for orgasm, then that would suggest that this one is as well. This would be male orgasm, and it's happening together, following close behind, so soon after. It's a much more pleasant metaphor than the kind of threatening fear version. Obviously, if you don't want to write about this as sexual metaphor, you can just describe the way that the sea is personified and moving in and out. If you don't feel comfortable writing about the kind of, it's quite an A-level-y poem for a GCSE, exam piece. But yeah, so as long as you get the idea, sea is personified as a man, and 2 interpretations, but I think that this is all about enjoyment and kind of consensual sex. And if you weren't convinced about the sexual metaphor, you will be here, okay? So we've got, I felt his silver heel upon my ankle, and then my shoes would overflow with pearl. So we've got here, nice enjambment focusing onto the ankle. So again, if we take the sexual metaphor out of it and we just look at it as the sea, this is the moment of the sea spilling over her shoes, but I don't think we can neglect to see the metaphor here of overflowing with pearl. I think this is definitely looking at male orgasm here. But what's really interesting, and again, backing up the idea that this is not about sexual fear or threat, but actual sexual awakening, is all of the connotations of value, the adjective silver, the noun pearl. These are beautiful items. So again, I don't think it carries, therefore, that this is about a kind of sense of fear. That's just my idea. Okay, and then this is the final stanza of the poem. Until we met the solid town, no one he seemed to know, and bowing with a mighty look at me, the sea withdrew. So we're back to the idea of familiarity. So again, if we go literally, the tide has come all the way up, so full tide, and it's almost like top of the beach meets the solid town. The adjective solid suggests that there's almost like a feeling of reality, the real world. And straight away, this is juxtaposed with unfamiliarity. No one he seemed to know. So this idea that the sea man is out of place in this familiar world, i.e., this love cannot happen, this love cannot continue. And therefore, bowing, personification, with a mighty look, that adjective there, mighty, as in it's profound, it's powerful, it's meaningful. With a mighty look at me, the sea withdrew. So, taking the metaphor away, it's about the tide going back out. But putting the metaphor back in, it's the realization that this type of love cannot last in the real world. So actually, It's a poem about sexual awakening, or the desire to have sexual awakening, but the realization that in the world of the narrator, it doesn't work. Now, I keep stressing that it's narrator because Emily Dickinson did not go for a walk on the beach and imagine having sex with a personified sea. But Emily Dickinson was a reclusive individual with a very, very complex love life, possibly because of her ill health and epilepsy. So the idea that she might be inspired to write a poem about sexual awakening and not being able to be in a relationship is very powerful and very poignant. And that is why this is one of my favourite poems of the collection of the Edexcel Time and Place anthology. I think it's brilliant. I do think it's a bit A-level-y. In fact, you might be watching this because it's on an A-level content, and that would make perfect sense to me. I hope that was helpful. Give me a shout if you've got any questions about the content or any lines that I didn't cover, and I will happily get back to you. Thanks again. Happy revising.